The 15th. Evening. You open your banking app to transfer another rent payment. Your finger hovers over the send button, a familiar movement you've been making for years. You press it. The money is gone. A second later, you've forgotten about it and move on with your life. Now imagine that this money doesn't just disappear every month. It slowly flows into someone else's pocket. And it doesn't just flow. It pays for someone else's retirement. Sounds like an exaggeration? I'll prove it with math right now, and you won't like the result. Let's take a regular rent of $1,300 a month, exactly the amount you just mentally sent. 25 years. This is the standard mortgage term, and this is exactly how long, on average, someone's life in a rented home drags on. $1,300 multiplied by 12 months, multiplied by 25 years. The result is $390,000. But rent never stands still. On average, it grows by 5.5% every year. Add this growth, and the total amount will exceed $450,000, almost $500,000 for 25 years of life. And now the most painful question: what will you get in return after 25 years of such payments? The answer is nothing. Absolute, literal zero. Not a single square meter, not a single dollar of your own equity, just a receipt for last month's payment. At the exact same time, the person who owns this apartment has effectively doubled their invested money over those same 25 years. Not because they are an investment genius, simply because they bought an asset on time and let someone else pay for it. That someone else is you, and this is just the beginning. It gets even more unpleasant from here, and even more interesting. My name is Wick. I am not a Wall Street consultant in an expensive suit. I am a candle that has watched for too long as other people's money melts away, warming other people's pockets. Today I will show you how this system works from the inside, and one trick that flips the rules of the game in your favor. But first, where exactly your money goes every month. Almost no one thinks this through to the end. When you pay rent, this amount is divided into several parts, and none of them work for you. The first part covers the interest on the landlord's mortgage. They owe the bank, but effectively, you are the one paying. The second part goes towards maintaining the house, the roof, the pipes, painting the walls. The house is maintained with your money, but it doesn't belong to you. The third part is pure profit, which the owner simply puts in their pocket every month without any effort. And there is a fourth, most important part, the growth in the value of the real estate itself. While you pay, the house becomes more expensive. All of this increase in value does not go to you. It goes to the person whose name is on the property documents. A simple and cruel formula. You pay for the entire asset, but someone else owns it. Want to see what this looks like in one specific life? Let's take two versions of the same person. Let's call her Rachel. Renter Rachel rents an apartment for $1,300 a month. Every year the rent grows a little, as it should. She pays on time, has never missed a payment, and takes good care of the apartment, a model tenant. After 10 years of this life, renter Rachel has $0 of real estate equity to her name, only a good credit history and a folder of receipts. And now the second version, house hacker Rachel. From the very beginning, she bought a small duplex and moved into one of its units. 10 years later, house hacker Rachel owns real estate that has grown in value, and the majority of the payments for it were made not by her, but by her tenant. The exact same person, the exact same salary, a completely different result 10 years later. Remember Rachel. We will come back to her and see the exact numbers of her second life. The difference is not in luck or genius, the difference is in one decision made at the very beginning. And here is what is especially frustrating. Just a generation ago, this fork in the road barely existed. A house cost 3 or 4 annual salaries, not 9 or 10 like it does now. Many of your parents could buy a regular house on the single salary of a school teacher or postal worker, without 2 sources of income, without any special tricks. This door didn't slam shut by accident. Prices grew faster than wages for decades in a row, and the gap between them turned into an abyss. If it seems to you that buying a house has become harder than before, you are not imagining things. It's not that you've gotten worse at budgeting. The rules of the game have changed. And that is exactly why old advice like, just save 10% of your salary, no longer solves the problem alone. A new move is needed. But before moving on to this move, you need to understand how deep this hole is, and why it is not just financial. There is an old story told by writer Terry Pratchett, and it explains what is happening better than any economics textbook. Imagine 2 pairs of boots. A rich man buys sturdy leather boots for $50. They serve him faithfully for 10 years in a row. A poor man cannot afford that amount all at once, so he buys cheap boots for $10. These boots fall apart after a year. He buys new ones, then again, and again. Over those same 10 years, the poor man spends $100, twice as much as his rich neighbor, and all this time his feet are wet, while the rich man's are not. Renting works on exactly the same principle. It seems that renting a home is cheaper and easier right now, this month, but in the long run, it is almost always more expensive than owning. Except that a poor person often literally has no choice. Life forces them to pay in installments and ultimately pay significantly more. This is the main paradox of poverty. The entry ticket is cheaper, but the final bill is much more expensive. But there is another bill that never shows up on a bank statement. Let's call it the safety tax. This tax is measured not in dollars, but in cortisol, the stress hormone that accumulates in the body every month. Every renter lives with a background, quiet fear, a rent increase letter, an eviction notice, a new owner deciding to sell the house. You cannot paint the walls the color you like. You cannot get a dog because the contract forbids it. Every 2 or 3 years, a typical renter moves, and this is not just an emotional stress. It also means direct money losses, a security deposit, movers, a new deposit, lost days at work for the sake of the move. One such move easily eats up several $1,000s. Add this to the already calculated math of renting, and you get, life in a rented home is structurally and literally more expensive than owning your own home. But it is precisely people with lower incomes who most often find themselves trapped in this system. It is easier to get into it than to get out. If you are between 25 and 45, there is a chance you recognized yourself in every one of these points just now. Maybe you have already tried to calculate whether you have enough for a house, saw the numbers, and simply closed the browser tab. Well, it's going to get even worse. Are you ready? Fine, you might say. Then why doesn't everyone just buy their own house and get out of this trap once and for all? This is where the real economic dead end of 2026 begins, and the numbers here speak for themselves. The median price of a typical single-family home currently stands at $409,000. Under standard purchasing conditions, a 3.5% down payment and a 6.23% interest rate, the monthly mortgage payment reaches $2,420 every month. Just to live in an ordinary, unremarkable house. To afford such a payment, according to standard financial rules, a family needs an annual income of more than $120,800. And now the most unpleasant part of this whole story. Only 16% of all renters in the country meet this criterion. 16 out of 100. Read that again. The remaining 84% simply do not cross the entry threshold. It's not a matter of laziness or bad financial decisions. It is a matter of math that physically does not add up for most people. That is exactly why every month people type the same anxious phrase into search engines, how to buy a house, 24,000 times a month. This is not idle curiosity, this is fear. The fear of forever remaining a renter, a person who pays their whole life but never owns. And this is precisely where the standard advice, just save for a down payment, starts to sound almost mocking. Because while you are saving, prices go up, rent goes up, and rates jump along with the economy. You are chasing a departing train that is accelerating faster than you. The standard path, to save up everything alone and buy a whole house on one salary, simply doesn't work mathematically for most people today. But there is one path that the traditional financial system prefers not to talk about too loudly, the very one I promised you at the beginning. Searches for the phrase house hacking have increased by 234% and now reach 290,000 searches every month. This is no longer a niche trick for professional real estate investors. It has become the only realistic way to make a mortgage affordable for the average person. What is house hacking? It sounds complicated, but the idea is ridiculously simple. Instead of buying a regular single-family house, you buy a house with multiple separate living units. For example, a duplex, a house with 2 apartments under one roof. You live in one half of the house, and you rent out the second half. The income from the tenant goes directly toward covering your $2,420 mortgage payment. In the best-case scenario, the rent covers the payment entirely, sometimes even more, and then you actually get paid for living in your own home. That very payment, which a minute ago looked absolutely unbearable, suddenly becomes manageable, because someone else is paying part of it. And here is the key twist of this whole story. Now the role of the person paying someone else's mortgage is not played by you, it's played by someone else. You effectively swap places with the landlord from the very beginning of this video. Every dollar that previously leaked into someone else's pocket without a trace now works for your own asset. Right now, an old voice is probably popping up in your head. What about debt? Isn't it scary to get into a mortgage? Since childhood, many have been taught that debt is bad, that a mortgage is a lifelong burden to be avoided at all costs. But there is a difference between debt that drains your money and debt that buys an asset appreciating in value while someone else partially pays for it. A loan for a new car wastes your money into nothing. A mortgage on a house that a tenant partially pays off works the opposite way. The fear of the word mortgage sometimes costs more than the mortgage itself. If a duplex is not the most comfortable option for you personally, there is a softer version of this exact strategy. It is called rent-a-room. Renting out a single room in a standard single-family home. You buy a house normally, without any complex multi-unit schemes. But you rent one of the bedrooms to a tenant, a housemate, rather than just an abstract renter. Income from such a room can bring in thousands of dollars a year. unburdened by additional taxes, and often this is enough to noticeably ease the monthly payment. This is not an ideal solution for everyone. Living with a housemate is not the most comfortable scenario for introverts. But the math speaks for itself. Between paying rent for the rest of your life and temporarily sharing a house with a tenant while the asset appreciates, the choice is obvious. Let's break this path down into 3 clear steps so it doesn't sound abstract. Step 1. Study the market for low-rise multi-unit buildings, duplexes, triplexes, specifically in your city or neighboring areas. Step 2. Talk to a loan officer about programs for buyers who plan to live in one of the building's apartments themselves. Step 3. The most important. Honestly calculate how much rent neighboring apartments in this area actually bring in. Here is what it looks like in numbers. If your tenant pays at least $1,500 of your $2,420 payment, your actual payment for your own house drops to $920 a month. This is less than many pay for a regular studio rental. For a house that is appreciating in value and belongs to you. And the most interesting part begins next. After a few years, when the payment for the first house becomes routine and manageable, many repeat this exact move and buy a second duplex. The first house by this point has already grown in value and accumulated its own equity, which can be used as a foundation for the next step. Thus, one trick, repeated a few times over a decade, turns into a full-fledged real estate portfolio that works for you while you sleep. This is not a story about immediately quitting your job and living on passive income. This is a story about stopping paying for someone else's portfolio and starting to build your own. Many are stopped by fear. What if the tenant turns out to be problematic? What if the apartment stands empty for a month? These are honest risks, and it would be dishonest to gloss over them. But compare this risk with the guaranteed result of regular renting. 0 equity after 25 years, which we calculated at the very beginning. A risk that has a chance of a huge payoff is almost always better than the guarantee of 0 results. And now, as promised, remember Rachel, the one with the duplex, 10 years later. If she had remained a renter, by this time she would have paid almost $200,000 and would have been left with exactly 0. Instead, house hacker Rachel pays less for her own home than she paid for a rented apartment in her first year of renting. And the house she owns has grown in value by tens of thousands of dollars over these 10 years, simply because she made one move at the right time. The exact same person, the exact same income, but 10 years later these are literally 2 different lives. Now let's look at the whole picture, because individual numbers are not the whole story. The real estate system in its current form is not an accident and not a bug in the code of the economy. It is a functioning mechanism, a mechanism of slow, methodical wealth redistribution from those who need housing to those who already have a second home. Every month, millions of renters across the country pay someone else's mortgage, someone else's growing equity, someone else's future comfortable retirement. They do this not because they are stupid or lazy, but because the system is designed so that the entry cost is expensive and alternatives remain almost invisible. House hacking is not a magic pill and not a way to get rich overnight without effort. It is a way to do exactly the same thing that the landlord used to do to you. Make someone else's money work for your own asset. This is a chance to jump on the boarding step of a departing train before it completely disappears over the horizon of rising prices. Think again about that almost $500,000 from the very beginning of this video. Money that drains into nowhere over 25 years of renting. Now imagine those same funds directed into an asset that grows, and not into the pocket of a stranger you will never even meet. The difference between these 2 scenarios is the difference between a person who retires with their own home and a capital cushion, and a person who retires with the exact same rent receipt. Every dollar has only one true function: to buy you freedom, time, and the opportunity to choose your own life. Renting gives this function to someone else. House hacking returns it to where it belongs, to you. A candle that burns for someone else's warmth sooner or later goes out, leaving nothing behind. But a candle that lights its own fire illuminates the path forward, even when some of the wax is shared with someone else. The question is not whether you are ready to one day become the one who gets paid. The question is how many more years you are willing to pay for someone else's retirement before you start building your own. This was Wick. Until the next video, count your money more carefully than the system does it for you. Thank you for watching, friends. I'm Wick, the Candle Man. Stay smart, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.